along the theme Architecture of Innovation. And this theme is not just about structures or systems, it's about the way we design, from the ground up, a future for our creative industries that is resilient, data-driven, and globally connected. And that's why today's panel is so important. Too often, our conversations surrounding the grant are truncated. But there are grants that should be applied to one module or goal of your project, as Ms. Kelly Magnus and I often discuss. And then there are project life cycles. And then there are value chains and an ecosystem. So within this context, what does the pipeline look like from grant to investment to long-term sustainability? We've heard in depth this morning about one of our biggest hurdles, data, how it is fragmented, collected in silos, not interoperable, and often disconnected from the very people and policies that are meant to support us. Without streamlined data, we can't measure real impact or show the evidence that convinces investors and policymakers. This is why Beyond the Grant challenges us to imagine a system where grants are not the end, but the beginning, entry points into a cycle of resilience, investment, and transformation. Today, I have carefully curated a panel whose expertise spans policy, entrepreneurship, creative practice, and financing. And together, they will help us to think through how we make sense, S-E-N-S-E, and how we make sense, money, and how we move forward. As we enter this conversation, I'd like to frame it with what I call the Triple R roadmap for creatives and creative companies. We begin with respecting cultural richesse. Richesse meaning wealth. This is about valuing our intellectual property, our heritage, and our cultural identities as the assets that they are, not just creatively, but economically. Then there are roadmaps, because without clear roadmaps, data, and pathways, we risk leaving creatives without direction. But with them, we chart routes that are actionable, equitable, and most importantly, scalable. And then finally, there is readiness. How do we prepare ourselves and our institutions to engage not just with grants, but with broader pipelines of capital, partnerships, and global opportunity? So as we dive in, let's keep this in mind. Our goal is not only to access grants, but to design systems of readiness, to respect the cultural richesse that makes us unique, and to build roadmaps that move us confidently into a sustainable, globally competitive future. With that, I am honored this afternoon, to introduce firstly a provocation by Mr. Akeem Chandler. Akeem needs no introduction to our Bajan audience. He will speak for himself, but he has been helping us to craft along our theme an architecture of innovation, providing the evidence of our creative space. I'd also like to introduce our moderator, who will take us deeper into this journey beyond the grant. Ms. Patrice Bersing is a cultural transformer and strategic leader with more than 20 years of experience, driving impact in the creative economy and cultural sectors. She specializes in innovation, brand collaboration, and cultural strategy, helping organizations and creatives to transform ideas into sustainable growth. She holds a bachelor's in entertainment business, a master's in global marketing management from Boston University, and an international graduate certificate in global business performance and international studies from Audencia Business School in France and Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico. A champion of lifelong learning, she recently completed a professional certificate in evidence and policymaking from the University of Oxford's, I don't know if I could get this word correct, Blavatnik School of Government. As founder and chief of innovation at Brand Carib Innovation Lab, Patrice is dedicated to elevating Caribbean creative industries onto the global stage through bold innovation and strategic partnerships. In just the past 2 years, she has secured over US $3 million in funding for elite Caymanian-owned creative projects across both the public and private sectors. Her career spans 19 industries, from technology and fashion to music, education, and entertainment, where she has led more than 300 projects that drive growth, innovation, and cultural impact. A passionate architect of cultural development, she has also shaped the Cayman Islands' creative landscape through national programs, arts festivals, and training initiatives, with various departments of the Cayman Islands government, as well as the Cayman National Cultural Foundation. Beyond policy, Patrice also serves as business manager and partner to London-based fashion designer, Mr. Jawara Aline, whose work has been embraced by none other than Rihanna, Shakira, and Lewis Hamilton, and featured in Vogue, Dazed, Harper's Bazaar, and GQ. A former World Economic Forum global shaper and Cayman Islands government scholar, Patrice is a fierce champion of authentic Caribbean excellence and remains deeply committed to building a vibrant, sustainable creative economy rooted in a strong Caribbean cultural identity. Please welcome to the Big Conversation stage our panel, moderated by Ms. Patrice Bersing. And we'll invite our panel up, and we'll also invite Mr. Akeem Chandler to come to the stage with his provocation. You want it?
Good evening, all you beautiful people. How y'all feeling? Y'all don't feel it. Y'all don't sell it. Y'all just had food. How y'all feeling? All right. So this piece is curated for this particular event called Make It Make Sense. Let me make it make sense. Because generational wealth was never in my family tree. The people are the leaves and our souls are the branches. But all we got are receipts from bank branches that take advantage of the disadvantage. In other words, me and you. The cash cow never grazed on the pastures I played on as a youth. I remember hearing of Wall Street, but it was only ever chattel houses from my avenue. We had to use outside bathrooms. We're keeping a bunch of shh on the inside. So you get a depressed economy when limited access to funding and corruption collide. And are we not tired of that here in the Caribbean? So let me make it make sense. Because GDP can measure goods and services, but it cannot measure joy. It forgets the unpaid labor of culture, the voluntary economy of mothers, the sweaty equity of fathers, the compound interest of ancestors who left resilience accruing in a bank of bloodline. So when I say make it make sense, I mean start by seeing this address as an asset, instead of giving others access where profits can be extracted and losses left for locals to deal with. How is it we got homegrown loans that are only approved if your last name sound imported? We've made foreign synonymous with important, putting constant pressure on our own vendors, suffocating their business ventures. A culture cannot breathe on emergency oxygen, cannot grow if its only water is short-term funding with the tap controlled elsewhere. We have to reimagine the pipeline if this is going to make sense. So imagine a world where funding equality is not the exception, but the expectation. A world where we put people before profit and pockets are not deeper than our understanding. A world where we stand in solidarity, employing empathy to promote growth, so our workforce isn't filled with people who are forced to work. A world not filled with families who are familiar with famine on a first-name basis, well acquainted with hunger as a daily companion, carving canyons in their stomach. This world will not starve its inhabitants of justice. will not feed them crumbs of consideration and tell them to be satisfied. We will not rise from the downfall of the oppressed. We will invest in backyard gyms as well as corporate buildings, recognizing that our wealth is already built in. So our balance sheet will balance soul as well as extended households upbringings, so the average girl can shatter the proverbial glass ceiling and use the shards to cut capital from the creases of an unfolding market. If the aim is funding, then sustainable development has to be the target. It should be dead in our sights with every proposal speech we recite, locked on to long-form plans about how we could take community groups and expand their reach to reach every parish. Then lend assistance in developing actual products that won't vanish overnight. We need national strategies understood by all strata of the community if this thing we call development is going to work right. So when I say make it make sense, I mean scaling solidarity. I mean measuring return in both revenue and in raised literacy rates. I mean measuring it in clogged brain drain that don't leak expertise to the states. I mean it in reduced school dropouts. I mean make it so a passion project can pay for rent. I mean make it so a driven individual can actually afford the gas to drive to work. I mean make it so when we search within our nest, we can find our own golden goose before we fly to barter our future for a few dollars just to get through. As we peel away at this orange economy, it should reveal a shared fruit ripened with opportunity, excreting our own creative juices. When I say make it make sense, I mean it would be foolish. And I mean foolish to allow funding to become the new version of slavery, where terms and conditions turn to chains and restrictions, lynching our imagination. When I say make it make sense, I mean make it so that Caribbean nations can sustain their own, where the price of asking for help doesn't cost us our home, doesn't cost us our dignity, doesn't cost us our autonomy. Make it where funding frameworks value money, but also value humanity. Make it make sense for them. Make it make sense for you. Make it make sense for me. I mean, make it into a seed that can finally plant generational wealth in everyone's Caribbean family tree. Let me make it make sense.
I think he needs another round of applause. That was powerful. In fact, I think I should go. I don't think I need to be here. Thank you, Akeem. I'm going to sit and use the mic on the seat, Mr. Maxey. Yes. So, thank you so much, Dr. Marielle. Thank you for inviting me and trusting me with this very important conversation. I hope that I will rise to the occasion, just like Akeem did. So why this title? First of all, it's amazing. It's an amazing double entendre on something that is deeply rooted in an ecosystem that is challenged by the thing that we don't like to talk about as creatives, which is money. So why this title? Because for far too long, when we talk about financing, the conversation begins and ends with traditional grants. And most importantly, while grants serve a purpose, they're short term, they're unpredictable, and they're limited in scope. So for this panel, what we did is narrow the scope a bit. So I gave all of the panelists a prompt, and they're each gonna come up here with a TED-style talk to address the prompt. In a rapidly changing global landscape, how can cultural financing models be redesigned not to just sustain, but regenerate Caribbean and global South creative ecosystems, ensuring equity, longevity, and community wealth? So I like to break things down in layman's terms instead of using this technical language. So rapidly changing global landscape, what does that mean? So basically, the world is changing fast, we know this. There's new technologies, shifting economies, climate pressures, and cultural trends that are reshaping the way that we live, we work, and we create. When we say cultural financing models being redesigned, not just to sustain but regenerate, what we're saying is how do we rethink the way money flows into culture and doesn't just keep things alive, but grows stronger, lasts longer, and is more sustainable. So it's a difference between planting seeds versus patching holes. Caribbean and Global South. It's a network of artists, creatives, and cultural workers within the Caribbean, yes, but places like Latin America, Africa, and other regions. So when we think Global South, it's not a geographic Global South. It's talking about communities that are rich in creativity but are typically left out of global funding systems. Ensuring equity. So it's not about being equal per se. It's making sure resources are distributed fairly around small players, marginalized voices, underrepresented communities, but that they have real access and not just the big institutions. And then ensuring longevity, building creative systems, lasting over time, and not just one-off jobs or one-off projects, but long-term. And then ensuring community wealth, which is my favorite and which is what Akeem was touching on. We want to make sure the benefits actually serve our culture, right? So jobs, pride, income, and stay within our communities and not just flow out. So with that, I want to now introduce you to a tool that we'll be using because this information is supposed to be two-way, and I want you to be a part of the conversation. So can we first do a bit of a technical exercise to scan this code and access our tool that will allow you to address some of the things that I raise to interact with me. Can you take out your phones and scan the barcode? Let me know when you've done so. Or if you can't scan the barcode, just go to menti.com and put in the code 5654C6376. Is the barcode working? Thumbs up? Awesome. So let's do a quick test. First question. I want to get a gauge of who's in the room. Who am I talking to? Which persona best describes you? Are you, okay, A students. We have a lot of creatives in the house. Shout out to the creatives. You work with creatives, or you're a fan of Caribbean creatives. All right, so it looks like we have more creatives in the room, although I think intuitively all of us are creatives as Caribbean people. So this was just a test for the tool, okay? So stay tuned to your phone without going on social media, put it face down, or I'm gonna charge you $50 every time I see you. No, I'm just joking. Whenever I ask you to go back to the phone, just open it up, don't close the window, to engage in the interactive exercises. Right. So, coming to the stage are the speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Eliana Prada. She's a leading specialist in creative industries at the Inter-American Development Bank. Since 2015, Eliana has designed and implemented creative economy initiatives across Latin America and the Caribbean, strengthening entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystems. With over 15 years of experience advising governments, multilateral organizations, and creative communities, she has shaped policies and programs that recognize culture not only as a social good, but also as a driver of economic development and opportunity. Eliana has co-authored several publications on the impact of the creative economy in areas such as employment generation, social inclusion, and urban development. She holds a master's in public relations and communications from Georgetown University and has completed executive courses at Harvard Business School on creative thinking, digital transformation, and public policy. Please join me in welcome Eliana Prada to share her insights in a 7-minute TED-style talk on reimagining financing for the creative economy.
Hello, hello. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Patrice, for this introduction, and thank you, Mariel, for this amazing panel that you put together. So let's see if the clicker works. Okay, great. So when preparing for this presentation, I remembered a quote that a friend of mine shared with me by Oscar Wilde that goes something like, when bankers get together for dinner, they talk about art. And when artists get together, they talk about money. And this is very interesting, right? And right on to the topic of this conversation today. So before plunging right into it, I wanted to give you a context of what the creative economy is. Why is it important? Why are we talking about this? Why, or what does the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, the leading multilateral organization that provides financing for development countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, have to do with fashion, music, gaming, movies? Well, in fact, it has to do a lot with all of these creative sectors. And why? Because the creative economy is a power source for employment generation, social inclusion, and economic impact. So let me give you some data that is very stunning for me, and I hope for all of you. As I said, the creative economy generates employment. Worldwide, it creates 50 million jobs, which account for, this number is a little bit intangible for my mind, but $2.25 trillion, which account for 3% of global GDP. That, in terms of Latin America and the Caribbean, is kind of as staggering. It represents 2% of GDP. It employs around 2 million people, almost, it's 1.9 million people, and represents around $124 billion in revenues. So this is huge. It's a huge, huge industry. So at the IDB, we have a decade long of study and working in understanding the creative economy, the creative ecosystem, who the creative entrepreneurs are, what the challenges are, and everything that has to do with public policy to push the creative economy agenda. And we started off in 2013, and we were talking about the orange economy back then, and we decided to do a taxonomy to understand what are those subsectors within the creative economy. We identified 38 subsectors, among which I can mention, for instance, marketing, arts, phonography, editorial, right? But I will share with you which are the 4 main sectors that are expected to have the greatest growth from now until 2030. And those are everything that has to do with what's called the creators economy, everything like audiovisual and animation, everything that you can think of, content creation for digital platforms and streaming platforms. Then we have video games, we have music, which is big here in the Caribbean, and also in the 4th place, there's ad tech. So again, the creative economy is a major source of employment generation. One piece of information that I love to mention is, I don't know how many people here in the audience are under 30, but the creative economy is the productive sector that employs, that provides greatest opportunities and jobs for youth under 30 and for women. So that's one piece of information that I love about the creative economy. Okay, so let's just right on to the challenges about the creative economy. There are tons of challenges, and we're really focusing and working on them at the Inter-American Development Bank. But I will focus on the 4 most standing out challenges. The first one has to do with financing. Every time I go and have a conversation anywhere around the world or around Latin America and the Caribbean, the recurrent theme is financing. We need financing for the creative economy, right? So the problem would be that the financing allocated for culture or the creative and cultural industries is very fragmented, scattered, and very much vulnerable to political cycles, right? How many times have we seen that a government changes and then the policy in favor of creative economy just falls under it? And then what we see in financing is usually like short-term subsidies or grants instead of long-term strategic investment. So that is one issue, the financing. The other challenge that we see all the time has to do with the lack, even though we have advanced a lot, we still lack data and evidence to support advocacy, to come and sit with governments and say, hey, this is a huge, huge sector that we need to invest in because it generates employment. It generates social inclusion, right? So we need more data and evidence. And also to provide a strong and solid policy infrastructure and everything related these days to IP, especially with the creatives. Another issue, the third one, would be everything that has to do with capacity building for the creatives, right? We see that there's a huge gap, and we see this after specifically the pandemic in the COVID-19, that there was a huge gap between what the, let's say in the audiovisual sector, the Amazons of the world, the Netflixes of the world were looking for, and the skill sets that the creatives have. So we still need to work on what those skills are and kind of like help the creatives get them. And the fourth and last one has to do with the informality of the sector. We know that it's very volatile and very much informal. But there's a good side to this. We can share what works, you know, what best practices. We have tons of best practices to share. I will just focus on two. As I said at the beginning, the figures, the data is stunning, right? The creative economy is not only just a niche. It's an still untapped productive sector that generates employment. And then the second one is all these new financial mechanisms that we've seen that work. For instance, the crowdfunding platforms, the blended private public sandboxes, right? Those are some that work, and we can continue delving into them even more later. Okay, so there is an opportunity to rethink what financing means for the creative economy, and I really urge us to think about staying away from the traditional financing models of grants and philanthropic aid, and more towards innovative ways of helping with this capital injection of money that creatives really need to step up and take their entrepreneurships to another level. And I think as important of the money is the way we talk about this. We really have to change the narrative and start seeing culture and the creative industries not just, as an expense, as it's seen in some countries, or an add-on, like a nice thing to have, but much more as a strategic, long-term investment. Remember, the creative economy generates employment, social inclusion, and economic development for all. And then, this is very important. I would invite you to take your phones out, scan this QR code, because this is all the information of the decade-long work that the IDB has done researching the creative economy. Some of my publications are there. Some are not authored by me, but are incredibly useful. There's lots of resources, free resources as well, that are very useful. And then the last one, that I truly believe that connection is everything among us, human beings. So I invite you, that is my personal LinkedIn page, where I'm actively responding and always offering help, questions, access to whatever I can be of help. So please, let's stay connected and let's continue the conversation.
Thank you, Eliana. So, before we move on, that's fine, to the next speaker, we're going back to the tool that we were using to test if you were actually listening to Eliana. Are you guys ready? So, you should be on the screen. There's a question. What are the fastest growing creative sectors within the creative economy? It's not this question. Oh, sorry. Are you guys still on the barcode, or do you want me to go back to scan again? All right. Oh, some people already. So you don't want to close out of the barcode. Let me know when you scan it. All right, so we're gonna go to the question. What are the fastest growing creative sectors within the creative economy? I'm gonna give you 20 seconds to answer the question before I allow Eliana to give the correct answer. What are the fastest growing creative sectors within the creative economy? You have 10 seconds. I see the answers coming in like hotcakes. Interesting. Eliana?
Those are the right ones. Audiovisual, video games, and music.
Right. Thank you. But you said video games and digital technologies.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. Yes, because I was listening. All right, for the next speaker, we have coming to the stage the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, the region's only indigenous multilateral development finance institution. With over 30 years of experience as a civil engineer, project manager, and development banker, he has led transformative projects that have improved the lives of more than 1.6 million Caribbean people through education, resilient infrastructure, and inclusive opportunities for women and girls. He previously served as Senior Infrastructure and Development Advisor to the Prime Minister of Barbados, and during his tenure as Director of Projects at CDB, pioneered the bank's first sustainable financing framework to mobilize private capital for regional growth. Widely recognized as a leading voice in resilient, inclusive development for the Caribbean, he continues to shape innovative financing models for the future of the region. He also moonlights as a thespian. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Daniel Best.
Thank you, Patrice, and thank you, Eliana, for that excellent presentation. Good afternoon, CariFesta 15. Good afternoon, CariFesta 15. Yeah, I am the same person on the screen. I may look different right now. But I promise you it's me. Make it make sense. That's what we're here to do, right? Make it make sense. S-E-N-S-E and C-E-N-T-S. I don't have any slides, but I have you all. And you're going to help me make some things make sense. On December 3rd, 2024, last year, I was elected the 7th president of the Caribbean Development Bank. That's actually not the point, but sure, I take the applause. The outpouring of love and congratulatory messages and everything was just absolutely overwhelming. But here's the thing. Online, the number of people that sent congratulations to me as Mr. Jones, the amount of messages that came in saying, a man like Mr. Jones moving up in Barbados. Congrats, Mr. Jones, we love you. So, for those who may not know, as Patrice might have mentioned, in not quite a previous life, but more than 10 years ago, I was the lead actor on the #1 television show here in Barbados called Keeping Up with the Joneses. That's still not quite the point, but I will take the applause again. The show ended almost 10 years ago. In that time, as you heard Patrice say, I was the director of projects at the Caribbean Development Bank for about 7 years. Over that period, I increased, well, me and the team, not me alone, increased approvals by 33% and increased disbursements by 24%. I was in the newspapers almost once every 2 or 3 weeks, but certainly once a month over that 7-year period, talking about all kinds of development initiatives. How is it that these people are still calling me Mr. Jones? Make it make sense. How is it that before coming in this room, 2 of the Hilton's workers outside talking to each other, and then they called me over and said, you was the man that was on that TV show, right? And I thought, I said yes, but you know, I've done some other things with my life since then. So Carrie Festa 15, you gotta help me make it make sense. SENSE. How is it that we in the development community, we in government, we as captains of industry, spend times and times again in boardrooms and conferences like this, throw money at coming up with public awareness campaigns, coming up with all kinds of fancy acronyms and initiatives because we want the public, we want our citizenry to relate to what we are doing that is impacting their lives in a meaningful and transformational way. And this fictional character that I stopped playing 10 years ago is somehow still reaching people. How is it that a mother could come to me 2 weeks ago, 2.5, 3 weeks ago about, and tell me she remembers the episode when my daughter was going out to party and how we had to go and save them because there were people trying to drug the drinks and all, and she used it to tell her daughter that these are the kind of things she got to watch out for. How is it that this show ended 10 years ago? Since then, we have done no end of things in the development community, but this fictional character, and I got a shout out to the gentleman who played my father, standing right there. Wave, let him see you. He played my father on the show, right? But how is it that that is what is actually reaching the people that we in the development community actively trying to reach, Eliana? Make it make sense. But all right, let me come out of Mr. Jones for a little bit and talk and be the president. Back in 2016, we in the Caribbean Development Bank recognized that there was no regional financing platform for the creative industries or culture. And so we determined that we will create one. And so we created the Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund, or CIF. And we capitalized it with $2.6 million in finance. And it focused on supporting innovation, job creation, and improved enterprise sustainability. There were 5 main areas that CIF would provide financing for: music, fashion, festivals, film, and the digital or creative, digitally created arts. Now, within that time, there have been 1,000 plus beneficiaries of the CIF program. Between 2018, it was approved in 2016, and between 2018 and 2023, there have been 1,000 plus beneficiaries of the CIF program, many of whom are right here at CariFesta and presenting what they are doing through CIF. It spans 17 countries, and essentially resulting in the creation of about 144 brand new jobs and delivered 30 successful projects. And we have been able to catalyze a further $500,000 in support, because it is a multi-donor fund that we created. But yes, it is primarily grants. In 2020 to 2023, we recognized also that we need to do something different in Haiti, because Haiti could not be captured within those 17 countries. And so we launched a special CIF Haiti with about $200,000, and that directly impacted 90 creatives in Haiti in the arts. So I on to the CENTS now. I hope you realize the shift from SENCS to CENTS. We determined that we needed to train people, because for this thing to be sustainable, as you said, for it to be sustainable, people need to know how to actually submit proposals, because we have to move past the grants. And so we trained over this period approximately 200 of our creatives across the regions in proposal writing. The other thing we've done, of course, is capacity building. And in capacity building, we focused on skills development, mentorship, and enterprise acceleration. But all of this goes to naught and will not make sense if the enabling environment is not there to support it. It will ultimately be one-off and grants. And so we focused on the enabling environment by providing financing for policy development and strategic frameworks. We also engaged in supporting research and knowledge sharing on the economic value of the cultural industries. But this thing gotta make sense. After the grants finished, it got to make sense. And so now what we are doing in this phase, incidentally, our board approved a recapitalization of SIF, which will take us to 2027. Yeah? I feel that's where you should actually clap for, to be honest with you. So our board has approved a recapitalization of SIF. But now we're trying to move past the grants because that's important. And so we are looking at blended financing instruments. And I am very pleased to report that in June of this year, at our annual board meeting in Brasilia, our board approved the first trade finance guarantee program that the bank has ever done, supporting de-risking investments such that commercial lenders, their investments into MSMEs who are involved in trade, have an easier path to move their goods intra-regionally and internationally. That was approved by our board in June. But we're not stopping there. We're gonna launch that trade finance program later this year, but we're not stopping there. At the beginning of next year, we will be launching an MSME, particular focus on MSME, partial credit guarantee scheme, again, to de-risk investment into MSMEs, such that the threshold through which MSMEs, and I'm speaking specifically here about the creatives, the threshold which they have to overcome to actually get their goods, their services across this region, across the world, becomes a little bit easier. Now, we know we live in the toughest neighborhood in the world when it comes to climate. But how come then climate financing and creative financing not linked? Make it make sense. The biggest revenue earners in our countries, among the biggest rather, is tourism, our tourism product. Crop Over, Trini Carnival, Vinci Mas, Spice Mas, Mashramani. Any GTs in the house? No Guyanese here. Jean Canoe in Bahamas. Any Bahamians in here? All right. I see you. Sugar Mas in St. Kitts. All right, I see you. I see you, St. Kitts. Nevis. But could you imagine? I love that boy, y'all. I love that. But could you imagine one adverse weather event passing through at the time of these festivals? What happens then? What happened when COVID hit us? And we ain't had Crop Over, we ain't had Carnival, we ain't had Spice Mas, we ain't had Vinci Mas, we ain't had Mashroom, we had none of them things. So how do we provide financing that is resilient and link it with cultural financing? The two things cannot be considered mutually exclusive. This is also what we're looking at. So essentially, the bank is seeking to move beyond the grants. We are seeking to move to a sustainable catalytic model. And we're throwing everything at it. Blended finance, guarantees, and receivables finance, essentially to transition from grant dependency to investment readiness. Because you see, this region here in the world, we have provided too much to the global economy in our artists, our creatives, our intellectuals, our athletes. And it's time that they're properly financed in a sustainable manner. We can make it make sense. Thank you.
Awesome. With time looming, it's time for us to go back to our phones. Are you ready? Are you listening? You had to be listening. So the next question for all the A+ students is, what areas does the SIF focus on when providing direct grant funding? Is it traditional performing arts, tourism and hospitality projects, community events and seminars, or D, music, fashion, festivals, film, animation, digital technologies, or digital tech-enabled creative sector? You have 20 seconds. Look at my A students. Are you sure though? Because he did mention how important the tourism sector was. What's the correct answer, Mr. Best?
They're all wrong. They're all wrong. I'm kidding. Yes, of course. Bang on. Bang on.
Thank you.
Give yourself a round of applause.
Awesome.
For that. Thank you.
All right, we're moving right along. So, our next speaker, after we've gotten this foundation from more of the systemic structures, the more corporate, traditional structures within the creative ecosystem, we're going to transition now to our resident creative, Jawara Aline, a Caymanian interdisciplinary artist and my fellow countryman, and fashion designer based in London. He's celebrated for his bold, deconstructed aesthetic and deep commitment to sustainability. A fixture at London Fashion Week since 2021, his designs have been worn by icons such as your queen, our queen, Rihanna, Beyonce, Tyler, Thames, Bella Hadid, Anok Yai, Lewis Hamilton, Nicole Kidman, Shakira, featured in Vogue, GQ, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, The New York Times, and more. In 2024, Rihanna herself named him her favorite new designer. And earlier this year, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York Costume Institute Spring-Summer Exhibition, Superfine Black Tailoring, featured 2 of his groundbreaking designs, placing him among the top designers in the world. Jawara is a tutor at his alma mater, Central St. Martin's University in London, and through his work, he continues to champion Caribbean cultural identity while advancing sustainability and circularity in fashion. Today, he joins us to share the perspective of a global creative who has broken barriers at his home in Grand Cayman, across the Caribbean, and on the international stage. Please welcome to the stage my dear friend, Jawara Aline.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Eliana, Daniel, and Patrice. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm just gonna sit. So, I'm just here to share a little bit about my experience as someone that has gone through the creative industry successfully. And thank you guys for inviting me to speak, and thank you guys for speaking ahead of me, and thank you for the work that you guys are doing, because of all 3 of your work is the reason why I can actually be here. So imagine being a young artist in Georgetown, Bridgetown, Kingston, or London, full of ideas that could shift culture, but with no resources to really make them happen. You're left to improvise, to bend, to self-fund your projects, while global culture benefits from your creativity, extracting from your work for profit. I'm Jawara Aline, a fashion designer, artist, and educator whose work is rooted in Caribbean identity. I run my creative business where I merge fashion, art, and storytelling, presenting my work on international stages. But my practice is grounded in community, in real people, real culture, and real possibilities. Now, over the years, the funding landscape has been both a help and a hindrance to me. I started fashion through Fresh, a program by the Cayman National Cultural Foundation, which offered no real financial gain, but it gave me an outlet to shape the trajectory of my career. Later, I received funding from the Department of Tourism to study fashion in London, a feat that was unconventional at the time, but proof of the value of the work that I'd been doing really being recognized. While in London, I applied for countless small grants, often unsuccessful, mostly unsuccessful. But those attempts sharpened my ability to articulate my practice. And by 2020, after completing my master's, I joined the Fashionista Incubator. It gave me exposure and small financial support towards my shows, but like many programs like these, it focused on talent development rather than building a sustainable business model. Fashionista, Fresh, and many other incubator programs alike, they can only do so much. I've now been in London for over 10 years, and what I've noticed from writing many grant applications is that too often, funding is shaped by a Western gaze, treating Global South creativity as inspiration to extract rather than systems or communities to invest in. Too often, these financial models are designed to keep us dependent, not to really help us build our independence. Cultural equity isn't simply about representation, which is a tactic that we see on the global stage in places like London and Paris. Cultural equity is about redistribution of resources, decision-making, power, and access. It's about reparative action, acknowledging centuries of ongoing extraction and turning investment into regeneration. So I have an example for you. When I moved to London, diversity was the main issue that was being dialogued within fashion. This started with diversity in skin color, which naturally then expanded into other kinds of diversity, such as body, size, age range, and to include people with disabilities. To support this, I helped set up a modeling agency with a friend of mine, Campbell Addy, called Knee Agency, which campaigned for representation. Now, the issue with this is that representation wasn't really enough. We didn't just need to see diversity on the runway, but we also needed to see it in the boardrooms as well. Equity means that when we tell our stories, we also own the means of telling them, distributing them, and benefiting from them. Ownership. Ownership, not permission, is the end game. I have another example for you. So at Notting Hill Carnival, another friend of mine, a visual artist, Alvaro Barrington, designs carnival trucks using canvases to tell our stories to our people. He builds installations for the carnival stage that platforms and celebrates our community in real time. After the celebration, those same works are returned to his studio, where they become base for artworks, and those artworks are then entered into galleries and collections. This is cultural equity in practice. The community experiences the work first, the story is rooted in us, then its value circulates outwards, with the artist and the community benefiting together. Existing in the community is what gives the work true value. Now, my start with fashion with the CNCF gave me space to experiment, to test ideas, to take risks. It gave me confidence and it connected me with local creative community in a way that shaped my practice forever. I'm here at Carfesta now twice directly because of that program. That experience taught me something fundamental. When funding centers the community, it doesn't just support one-off projects, it launches careers, it creates community pillars, and strengthens the creative ecosystem as a whole. Investment in our people can only come back to serve us. Today, we need creative solutions, so investment in creativity is key. Now, jump scare back to 2020. I just graduated from Central St. Martin's, straight into the global pandemic. Needless to say, resources were limited and the market was volatile. I had to pivot. I'd built up an idea of the industry from looking at designers before me, and as soon as I entered into the industry, that world was no more. I thought that making fabulous clothes was enough to drive business, but quickly I realized that I had to come up with something else, something a little bit more innovative. The system simply just wouldn't allow for that approach to be successful. So instead of just going down the traditional route, I separated my collections. The main line, which contains ready-to-wear, couture, the general things that you see at Fashion Week, and then the Untitled collection, which contained streetwear and anti-fashion-like practices. Through the Untitled collection, I've designed within my practice a circular framework, taking end-of-life garments from the bottom of the product chain, repurposing them by deconstructing and reconstructing, creating new items, giving them a new sense of value so that they could be given a new life. Every step of production became an exercise in creative problem solving and self-sufficiency. I had no access to machinery at that time, so I designed garments that placed the value in what I could do with my own two hands. Scarcity became a driver of invention, and that innovation led me to new ways of creating value for my customers. Through Untitled, I realized that designers aren't just plugging products into the system. We can design the systems ourselves. We can create cooperative models, pool resources, and reinvest in shared infrastructure. We can develop circular economies where revenues from one project funds the next project or funds the next generation of creators. We can take equity stakes in projects so that artists build long-term wealth, not just one-off gains, and we can integrate craft, tourism, and digital platforms to build self-sustaining creative ecosystems. If we can design clothes, music, images that shape culture, we can design the systems that finance it too. The Global South has been fueled by global culture. The Global South has been fueling global culture for centuries. The question is no longer whether we are creative. The question is whether we will finally own the wealth our creativity generates, rather than line in the pockets of our tech overlords. Regeneration means moving from aid to agency, from extraction to ownership. It means designing financing models that builds community wealth, cultural sovereignty, and longevity. The future of global culture depends on whether we dare to build systems and empower creators and their communities, rather than just merely sustaining them. Thank you.
Isn't he amazing, everyone? I just have to give you a quick tip or a quick fact about Jawara. I call him a CARICOM baby. So yes, he's from the Cayman Islands, but he has Jamaican heritage, Barbadian heritage, and Panamanian heritage. And what you're looking at, and I have to say it, is the result of a government that invested in the people. So I have to big up the Cayman Islands government. I have to big up the Cayman Islands Department of Tourism and the Cayman Islands National Cultural Foundation. So, moving on. Were you listening? I'm sure you were. Next question. Ready? What is often missing for creatives in current cultural financing models? Is it creativity? Jesus. Ownership and equity, marketing and inspiration. I love this class. Exactly. I saw everybody moved when he talked about ownership and equity. And so thank you for that, Joe. I don't think you have to give the correct answer. Everybody was listening.
Pretty clear.
Yeah, you are. Okay, so last but certainly not the least, we have coming to the stage Andre Leroux, Managing Director of IKS Cultural Consulting.
Action.
Where the live music scene is today wouldn't be quite where it is at the moment if it hadn't been for the support and initiatives of something like Constance.
What's important about this program is that it speaks to what music can do for educational purposes. It speaks to what music does for entertainment purposes. It speaks to what music does for individual well-being.
Other countries, there are foundations that really help musicians to create and not worry. So to get something like this is very important so that people can take the music to the people.
I got digital mobility funding in the thick of COVID where we were hungry, guys. Yeah.
It helps the nation understand itself. It helps us feel better about who we are, and it helps us become more of who we are instead of living in small, frightened cages.
It can be really tricky when you're making music like for the artistry of music, but at the same time you have bills to pay.
You were my friend and you called me love.
Because the beast itself is designed to put us in competition, shrink the soul of the song, not care for the vessel. The vessel is always under threat.
Dreams, that's all there is.
As a living, very tough. You have to be strong. It really can't be okay if you're not using your gift. I believe a gift unused becomes a curse. You want to allow your creativity to just go big.
Music is not just cerebral. Music is deeper than that. It's what you are.
It's a healer. And we
to nurture it because it's vital that we create spaces for music to be able to blossom and heal.
We as musicians have a very important role to fill in society. We're like healers of some sort. We're therapists.
We need to sell the truth about the importance of something like this and get support for it.
I believe that if Concert SA were to disappear, there is nothing in the wind that would replace it.
If we get to a place where we don't have that, I'm a little bit scared.
We need to go back to my presentation. In the meantime, I will give you some background on Andre. Excellent. So, Andre, who's just joined us on stage, is also the head of the Concerts SA project. We just learned about that from his video. Widely recognized as a leading cultural activist and arts manager, Andre has spent decades advancing Africa's creative industries and building bridges across the continent and beyond. He's a founder of Music in Africa, Moshito, and Samex, is that how I say it? And currently serves on the board of the Market Theatre Foundation, while also acting as an ambassador for the African Culture Fund and advisor to Connect for Culture Africa. Previously, Andre was managing director of the SAMPRO Foundation, the largest music rights organization in Africa, and has served on numerous cultural boards from Business and Arts South Africa to the Arterial Network of South Africa. With his deep commitment to collaboration, sustainability, and Pan-African cultural exchange, Andre continues to shape the future of the creative economy on the continent. So please welcome to the stage again, Mr. Andre Leroux.
Thanks, Patrice. Hi, can you all hear me from here? Is that cool? Okay, if this, is that better, like this? So I'll lean into the microphone. Okay. If Jawara can be seated, then I can also be seated. He's younger than me.
Yes, you can. I can hear you clearly.
Cool, okay. I like what you said about funding being shaped by a Western gaze. When we first developed our mobility fund about 10 years ago, I met with people from the British Council, and they said, here's 700,000 Rand, a lot of money. And they said, can you use this to do something for live music? And what we did, I said, yes, we can. And they said, well, we can take artists to London. I said, cool, but that's not what I want to do. I'll take 100,000 and we'll send artists to Great Escape in London, and the rest of the 600,000 we'll do in the SADC region. And I think it really is important to challenge the donors, challenge the Western gaze, and then look at how we develop different models that supports us and not taking our creativity elsewhere. Daniel, I liked some of the things you said as well. And yeah, it's nice to see that you're an activist. And in terms of women, and you mentioned women, and Eliana mentioned women, and when we talk about the arts, and we've been supporting research for the last 10 years, and it's important that when we talk about data, facts, figures, and statistics, it needs to be digestible, it needs to be relatable, and it needs to be consumable, because often we don't do things in a way that people can consume what we create, especially when we operate on a macro level. So we produced some research on women in live music, and I've got some copies available, and it's available as a free download. But what's important about that, it also spoke directly to women and the challenges. There's something called a pink tax. A man can wear the same outfit, a black suit, 10 times. Nobody complains. A woman has to change her outfit. A woman has to change her makeup. She's got to change her jewelry. A woman has to go backstage, and she's often doesn't have a dressing room. A woman's got to get a lift home. But that's not what we're talking about today. But I was touched by some of the things that you said. Marielle and Erika. Hi, Marielle, how's it? Nice to see you wearing the choker I gave you. I saw. And Erika's somewhere at the back. Are you still here, Erika, or did you run away already? So I met them in Algiers about 2 years ago, and it's great to be in Barbados for the first time. It's great to be in the Caribbean for the first time. Yesterday, and Keith Nurse is also here somewhere. Oh, there you are, Keith. Yesterday I got to a dinner with Keith and Erica and a range of people, and I think they thought I was high. I was high, but I was high with local experience. A couple of days ago, Erica said to me, "You've got to get a cutter, a fish cutter." I'm like, what the hell is a fish cutter? A fish cutter is apparently a fish sandwich, and it's the guy across the road here. His name is Kuz, and apparently he makes the best fish cutter. So this is not a plug for Kuz, but it is a plug for Kuz. Often, we talk about the arts, we talk about money, we talk about funding, we talk about sponsorship, we talk about macroeconomics at a very high scale. When I went to Kuz, I got a simple sandwich. It was delicious. We had a chat. I could hardly understand what he was saying. His accent is so heavy. There was another guy that was bumming over there, and I didn't give him money, so no funding involved. But I got to taste a little bit of local culture. I got to experience a little bit about Barbados. I got to engage with strange people coming up and down, having a beer or two and a swim in the ocean. And I think quite often we need to really think about how, as we work in these big institutions, how do we drill down and make things real? Because small is beautiful in our sector. Akeem, your address earlier was also fabulous. And I totally like your emphasis on work. And quite often, when we focus on facts, figures, and data, we focus on jobs and employment. I'm not critiquing the people on the panel that spoke about that. But, you know, when we talk jobs and we talk employment, we sometimes miss where the world is going, where gigs are at, and that you're only as good as your last gig. And we really need to understand how we quantify work. Some of the people that are with Erica at the collective management organizations, they create works. Some of them create beautiful songs, and they make more money than I would ever do. And yet I've got a job, but they've got work and works. So we need to think about the different economic paradigms as to how we calculate. Now, coming back to what I'm supposed to talk about, I'm supposed to make it make sense. There are 3 projects that I'm going to talk about. The one you saw already, so I'll talk about that last. The first one is the South X project. So firstly, Marielle invited me, I think about 3 months ago, and told me about CARIFest. I was like, cool, I'm coming. And just shortly after that, Erica gave me a call and said, I've got this project. You guys in South Africa are not delivering. Will you deliver? You know, sometimes happen in the creative industries. It's not just about policies, papers. You need to do projects and programs. I'm a firm believer that how you change lives is not through policy. You change lives through good projects and sustainable programs that are consistent and continuous, like the cutter that we get from Kuz over there. So and that doesn't mean I'm not a policy person. I've worked at local, provincial, and national and international level. I've served at the European Union, and I've been part of a lot of those policy debates that influence a lot of the envelopes that come out, and it feeds a very false economy. The real economy, we need real projects and programs that work. For me, the big bugbear, okay, I won't go to that one now. So the South X project was just 2 artists from Barbados coming to South Africa, and they were going to come and do mixing and mastering, record their music, bring the music back. Spoke to Erica, and I said, no, that's not what they're going to do. They're going to perform with live artists. They were going to do 1 performance. We did 4 performances. We did some workshops with them. We got them to meet some of the best producers. We got them to hone their skills and craft, and then they came back here, and Erica said, you're coming to CARIFest, stay 2 more days, we'll do a launch. We did the launch, and that is a small recipe for something that can scale up. And scaling up is really important in terms of things that work. It's called the South X project, so you can Google that one. The next one, and I'm sorry, Marielle, I don't believe in festivals that much. Sometimes, you know, we have a lot of festivals, but festivals where we put a lot of money and people get to eat once in a long space of time. We need things that are regular and consistent. We need people to land here and not just go to a festival, to go to where music is consumed by locals, to go to where locals are wearing fashion, and locals need to enjoy so that tourists also come. Yes, there is a tourism economy, and that's great, but we need regularity and consistency of production and consumption. Because quite often we forget to look at the consumption environment, the local consumption environment. And the Festival Enterprise Catalyst that we developed with festivals, it's 7 of the top festivals in South Africa. And once again, what we did, we leveraged 10 million of our funds, and we got 10 million of government funds, because where the world seems to be going is matching funding, leverage funding, and partner funding. So we use that money not only to program productions at the festivals, but to really say that shows should not happen once off. They need to tour. So every show that's produced has to tour a whole range of festivals so that there's more people eating, there's more people consuming the arts. And then the last project I'm supposed to talk about is the Concerts SA project, which I'm really passionate about. I'm passionate about mobility, circuits, touring, and getting more people to consume the cultures of different countries. Facts, figures, and data, because you know we have to do that on a panel like this. Over 27,000 artists we supported. We created work for them over a 10-year period. Over 270 schools concerts, because it's important that your top artists also go into the schools and activate those kids. You see the light bulbs going off. When you see a top artist performing in the school, I don't watch the stage. I watch the kids. You see them triggering. You see them seeing something catalytic. And you see the artists change who they are when they feed off the energy from the kids. During COVID, our funding was going to leave, so we turned a mobility fund into a digital mobility fund. There's research on our website about that, because usually I get asked what digital mobility is. And no, not everybody makes money from streaming. Actually, very few people. So Digital Futures is on our website. In terms of concerts, we supported 3,862 concerts over a 10-year period. It's more than one concert a day. But what was more important was that they weren't at festivals. They were in small venues. They were in local spaces. They created circuits. And we got people to tour across 13 African countries in the SADC region. So we increased the mobility of artists. We increased the stability of venues. We created more than 153 partnerships. And to the funders on the panel, for us as well, we believe in non-exclusive funding. That 153 partnerships, some of them was partnering with the local cutter down the road. Some of them was partnering with a technical crew. Some of them were partnering, we gave him 45,000 and he managed to gain about 450,000 by bringing a top UK artist. So that talks about funding that's not funding, but maybe subsidies that are catalytic. And I think that's where we need to start thinking and going. The artist that you saw on the video, her name is Msaki. The first time we supported her was at the Soweto Craft Fair. She was a little chubby like me, and her EP was not that great. 10 years later, she doesn't perform to small venues. She performs to 5,000 seaters. But she's found her tribe. She's developed a record company, a publishing company, and we've walked a journey with her so that she grows her business to influence an ecosystem and take others with her. And those are the models I think we need to develop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andre.
I'm sorry for deviating from the script.
No, I love it. What I consider you is a bridge builder. So we started off with setting the foundation and understanding the ecosystem from a macroeconomic perspective, the perspective of the funder, both of them, and then Jawara gave us the perspective of globally competing creatives, because that's where we're all trying to head to as a creative. And so what you did was help us to see the intersectionality between those two and also the gaps. But before we move on, I have a quiz for you. Were you listening? This is a numbers question, but it's easy. Approximately how many artists has Concerts SA, the organization Andre spoke about, supported through IKS Africa over 10 years? Is it over 15,000, over 14,000, over 27,000, and over 23,000? Which one of them? And then I'll allow you to answer the question, Andre, and quickly expound upon them in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Everybody's smart. Andre, correct?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, so now we get into the conversation part of the big conversation. Now that we have a clear understanding of who's on the stage, do you agree? All right, let us now move into the conversation, but we want you to be a part of it. So let's kick it off with you guys answering this question. What do you think is the biggest challenge creatives face when it comes to funding their work? Do you think it's limited access to investors or financial institutions? Lack of awareness about funding opportunities? Difficulty proving economic and social value of creativity? Short-term unsustainable funding models? Limited skills in financial management and fundraising? I'll give you 10 more seconds to think about this question and give me an answer to set the stage for the discussion for my lovely esteemed panel to provoke. Ten, 9, 8, interesting, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the majority of responses are towards the third response, difficulty proving economic and social value of creativity. So I'm leaving this here for the panel to consider as you engage in discourse, but the correct answer is all of them. And with that said, I'm going to ask Jawara to be the first to break the ice and start the discussion by telling us what cultural equity in financing means to you as an artist, since you brought it up. And then you guys are free to chime in and have a conversation. If it gets too messy, which I know it won't, I'll chime in, but it's your stage.
So, repeat that again. Cultural equity in...
You spoke about equity. So what does equity in financing mean to you as an artist?
So cultural equity for me means the ownership of our culture, ownership of the way that we dialogue about our culture, ownership of the way that we distribute our culture, ownership of the way and what stories we actually tell as well, and what point of views we tell those stories from, ownership of who we're speaking to, ownership of how we can create economies around those stories as well.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So you spoke about some models that SA or South Africa did. Can you tell us what lessons in your arts funding models that can be applied to Caribbean creatives or for funders? And then Mr. Best, if you want to chime in about how we can not only measure, but form spaces for creatives to actually get equity, understanding our financial models in the Caribbean. So Andre, what are some models we can learn from some South Africa and apply them here in the Caribbean and Global South?
One of the models for me, so I've worked across grant-making agencies, arts councils, government, and all of those. And the actual applications model is also a tool. And what we managed to do with our applications process, and it also deals with that difficulty of proving economic and social value of creativity. What we did with our applications tool is like, it's artist focused, so an artist would apply, but they would apply to do a tour. So that means they've got to think about doing the tour. They've got to develop a budget for the tour. They've got to get the letters that the venues are licensed, which means they're engaging, before they even got the money, they're already engaging with people about what that tour is going to be, and they're talking to venues, so they're having a sense of the size, the scope, the budget, and by the time they finish an applications process and they click send, it gets sent back to their inbox. So in our last applications round, we had over 400 applications. We only had 50 grants, which meant I made 50 friends and 350 enemies. But on the other hand, a lot of them used that application as a business plan, as a tool, and to be able to apply elsewhere. The same thing you said earlier about all those little grants you apply for, it gets to hone who you are. So as a funder, as a donor, we need to not just think about the reporting, the monitoring, and the applications in a way that's punitive, but in a way that it builds the applicant, it builds their portfolio so that they can use it elsewhere.
To add to that as well, I think one of the really important things to think about as well, as someone that has applied for many grants in the process of building what I now know to be my creative practice, is that there's so much as a creative that you're not taught, especially for creatives who did not go to school for whatever sector they're in. And education is so important in upskilling and in sort of defining the business around whatever it is that you do. And I think, yes, grants are important, but for me, it was so important to have those access points that forced me to think about how my creativity sits within the financial sector. How does my creativity sit within sort of all of these other aspects of society that work together but are never dialogued alongside each other? We have finance in a section by itself, we have the creativity section in a sector by itself, tourism in a sector by itself, but actually all of these industries are so interlinked. And I think one of the positives that has come out of the multiplicities of grants that I've had to apply is it forced me to think about what is important about my practice for financiers.
Thank you. Look, you know, I'm happy with the level of candor in the conversation thus far. So let's carry it a little bit further and be fully honest. We have a disconnect. We have a major disconnect between our creatives and our financiers. And I'm happy that you have IDB and CDB on stage, but I can guarantee you that Ileana and me and Lisa and Melanie and Maria, we don't actually write any of these loans, right? So in other words, you have creatives who are going to commercial spaces, DFIs, whoever, who have the private sector capital, essentially, to provide it. Because we want to move past the grants. We have grants that we can provide. So I spoke about the show I did, right? What I didn't mention was that over 2 seasons, and we did a scientific survey, over 2 seasons, we were the #1 show in Barbados and top 5 on the Africa channel in the UK. 7 episodes in the first season, 6 episodes in the second season. That should have been my question. You know how much I got paid? $1,192.26 for both seasons combined. That works out at $92 an episode. So I decided, you know what, I can rate this CDB thing and see where it takes me, because I got children to feed. So we have a disconnect. And the guy who wrote the show, directed it and produced it, we filmed the 3rd season, but we can put it out there. So he's actually right now a teacher in China. Left Barbados, left the Caribbean. I done with that. He gone over there and teaching. So we have a real disconnect. So to your question, Patrice, in terms of how we make this thing sustainable, how we make it make sense, we need to unlock collateral from creative assets. So Johara would have just mentioned what he went through with submitting proposals, but he, as you have heard from him, he learned that in the School of Hard Knocks, right? He submitted proposals and learned from this, and then he got better at it, and he got better. I know he's a global icon in the fashion industry, right? So what we did at CDB, I mentioned it, is we trained in 2021. I think it was 200 persons in proposal writing, because we got this thing in the region where, you know, I went through it, so you got to go through it too. That's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. Because I got the scars to show for it, me, you got the scars to show for it. No, I can teach you so that you don't have to get these scars. And then you can teach somebody else. So we train 200 persons, creatives, in what a successful proposal looks like. Not just for CDB, but to access financing. Now, here's the other part of it, the other part of the disconnect I spoke about, which is really the part that got to make sense. When we finish doing all of that, the people that they sit down in front of, the loan officers, have to understand how to actually value creative assets. Have to understand IP rights, have to understand contracts and receivables, have to understand so that when an artist comes before them, like you said, not with a job, but with gigs, with work that is sustainable, how can you securitize that such that it can ultimately be monetized and realize that this person is actually not a risk? Because I tell you something, and I know this from watching my parents as a child grow up, poor people is pay. Poor people pay their debts. Artists pay their debts. So when you sit down in front of a loan officer, you have to feel in your mind that, you know what, this person is going to take me seriously. And so that's the next thing we did at the bank. Back in 2022, we actually trained 20 loan and commercial officers across 14 of our borrowing member countries to be able to appreciate and appraise in a sensible way and in a way that leads to reasonableness how to value creatives when they come for loans. And we're doing it again. We're doing it again in the coming year. We're going back out there to our countries and we're going to train more of them. Because they said we aren't the ones waiting, if we're going to move past the grants, if we are to move past the grants in a serious way, we need the commercial sector to get involved and value creative assets reasonably. Thank you.
Thank you. Did that answer your question? Go ahead.
Yeah, look, I think it's, on the one hand, to make it make sense, outside from a donor side, and I've been with a number of donor bodies, we also got to be careful the way we structure things, that we're going to make it make sense to an ecosystem. So if it's in the music industry, supporting promoters, and some of them are shocks, but some of them need to be supported, but in ways that we can make them accountable. Supporting small venues in ways that they can sustain themselves. Some of them won't always be sustainable and their doors will shut. Taking artists to school, it builds not only a future audience, it builds the ability to enhance your craft. Another part of making it make sense, I think there's a whole lot of creatives in the house. How many creatives are in the house? A whole lot of them. And you guys got to make it make sense to us as well. You've got to do those final reports and do them well. You've got to write your stories. And of the 400 odd grants that we had applications for, about 800 applications came in and 400 was incomplete. Of the 400, we reduced to about 180 that was worth looking at. Of the 180, we reduced to the 50. So as creatives, you also need to take your craft seriously. You need to take the reporting seriously, because that allows us to do the reports so that we can have the facts, figures, and data to be able to develop the projects, the programs that can sustain a sector. So it's also up to the creatives to help us do that.
Ileana?
Was that me? Okay. I mean, I don't want to just piggybacking on, it's totally agree with what my colleagues have shared, but I want to just emphasize what Jawara was saying about education and skilling needed for creators, which in fact has to do a lot with monetizing our own creations and our art. So there is a gap in most of the creators, not many, but you mentioned maybe your experience that it's a lack of education, and specifically we see it in a lack of a business mindset, right? So we are providing the skill sets needed in digitalization and business skills, precisely so that they can face up or have a conversation with financial institutions and request, but basically knowing how to monetize your own creations. And then that goes very much linked onto, for the private sector or the fund financiers, is also educating them as well, right? On what is the return on investment of investing in creativity and culture. So it's a two-way thing. On the one hand is educating or providing the skills needed for creators, basically on digitalization and business skills, IP rights and how they can protect their own creations, and also having frequent conversations with the private sector on financial institutions on the importance of investing on creativity and culture. And let me just say one thing that I love to quote about, there's an Uruguayan artist that I love, Oscar-winning Jorge Drexler, that he says in Spanish, I will say it in Spanish and I will translate it, cobra lo que tengas que cobrar, so charge whatever you have to charge, but do it for the sake of art. Because there is a kind of sometimes a reluctance, and I see it in some countries that, no, we're artists, you know, we cannot monetize on art, you know, and there's a whole debate. And we, as the IDB, we try to push them on to, no, you have to, because there's a whole debate on that. But I just wanted to throw the quote from Jorge Drexler out there, that you have to monetize on your art and your creativity.
Add to that as well, advice for any creatives in the room. You have to take the initiative. As somebody that I studied business before I actually studied fashion. And then when I studied fashion, I studied both fashion design and marketing at the same time. Then I studied design in menswear. So technically, I should have been educated in a lot of these things, but even though I went to all of these different schools and searched to get the information, quite often is the education system is outdated, actually, realistically. And I'm somebody that was very lucky to be able to go to many different schools to upskill myself. But from going to school, I realized that actually the information that you need, you don't really learn it in school. So you have to really take the initiative to go out and figure out what is it that I need to know in order to build a business around myself. I think as an artist, we are taught, actually, and this goes back into the myth of the Global South creating cultural capital for the world and then being told that actually, oh, we should just do it for the love of the creativity, and it's just for the sake of art, and don't think about the money side of things. But actually, if you intend to use your art to make a business that you're actually going to be able to pay your bills at the end of the month, you really need to figure out how you can monetize what it is that you do. And also sometimes maybe you want to separate some things within your practice that isn't, that you don't want to do for money, but you really need to figure out and take the initiative to solve and resolve the business around whatever your practice actually is.
Thanks, and to touch on that, and I know you want to speak, Andre, what I'm getting is a theme of education. If you guys are hearing the same thing, because you're talking about the gaps or the disconnect between development institutions and private financial institutions and in their systems. And Andre, you also touched on upskilling. Jawar, you touched on having the type of education to empower you to apply for those grants, to understand those grants and understand those languages. So I want the both of you to think about how can financial or development financial institutions think about collaborating with educational institutions, because that's something that we have in our control. We can't control FCIB. We can't control Scotiabank. What we can control is upskilling our people to be able to understand the language so that when it's in front of them, they can digest it and that they can leverage it for their own good. So Andre?
Education institutions, it's a major issue. A lot of artists, you're right, they leave an academic institution having a doctorate or a master's and they know how to create art, but they don't know how to make money. They're creating property which they don't even know is intellectual. They want royalties, but they haven't even registered their works because they don't know how to do so. So the last couple of days I spent with some of the collection societies from the Caribbean, and we were chatting, and the focus on education was also there. But it's going to be impossible in a country like mine to educate everyone. So those educational resources and institutions need to shift, they need to change, and we need to increase levels of education. Those faculties that train the arts need to train the arts for the real world, but that's not the only thing. Those institutions like ours, those institutions like the collection societies, and we're talking about collaborating with your institution and developing courses over the next period, but not everyone is going to get to those courses. Lots of artists are self-taught and self-trained. So there is a big challenge also in terms of communication. There's a challenge in terms of how we package those resources. There's a challenge in terms of if you're going to produce financial statements for the collection society, have you done an explainer video that goes along with it, that captures the imagination? When you produce a report, is there a smaller people's version like this is a 70-page report, and then you write it in colloquial language? Is there a campaign that allows access to information and bite-sized chunks to hook people into it? So the communications aspect needs to be really done in ways that people can access that knowledge, and those that want to take it further can also be self-taught with stuff being streamed online, but proper courses, not nonsense stuff.
Okay. At the IDB, and I'm happy to share this with you if you request it, we have free online courses that have to do with creative entrepreneurs and how to acquire those skills needed to thrive in today's marketplace. So I'm happy to share those with you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Andrea and Eliana. And I totally agree. As I said, we train in 200 plus, and we on both sides of the divide, artists and appraisers. But again, we in the Caribbean, you gotta be honest. You have to be honest. We're here to talk about make it make sense. It's not only artists in the Caribbean that have no idea how to make money or have no idea about business. We need to start, and I'm not trying to divert from the creative industries, but if we're talking about financial literacy and training, we got to start at the primary school level so that whatever you become, you appreciate business. You appreciate how to make money. You shouldn't have to determine that you can do a university course. You shouldn't have to determine that you can do a PhD or a master's to understand that this is how I need to protect my money. We got to start that from the primary school level, from secondary school, so that whatever you ultimately become in life, you know how to make sense of your money. I just wanted to make that plug. Thank you.
I wish we can speak all day, but we need to progress the conversation and hear from the audience. So at this time, I'm going to skip ahead to our Ask Us Anything segment. So open your apps, think about what was discussed, and here's an opportunity to submit your questions. If you have a specific question for a panelist, just say this is for Eliana, so-and-so, or if it's a broad question, just ask the question. I'm gonna give you 20 or 30 seconds to come up with these questions, and I'm gonna field as many as I can. We only have 20 minutes, and we need to wrap. They need to be able to respond. We have a panel right after ours. So while we're waiting for the questions to come in, I'm getting a theme of more investment in our people, whether it's through education curricula, whether it's programs to improve communication between the traditional institutions and the artists and the creatives, as well as, I think, improving the mechanisms to apply for grant funding and to upskill and capacity build, not just the creatives, but financial institutions in understanding how to value intellectual property so that creatives can use their IP for collateral for structured funding, correct? Is there any questions that you guys have? Well, I have questions.
There's one other one, Patrice. There's one other area that Andrea, and I appreciate
go ahead.
Andrea not recognizing the gravity of what he said, given where he lives and scale. So Andrea was casually talking, I'm not sure, right? Casually talking about 45,000 people, 45,000 people in the population, Dominica is 70,000. But I want us within the region to appreciate that we have access to markets. So he is literally sitting right here in the Caribbean. We have access to markets. If we are to make it, you now live in London, right? Yeah. We got what is the last census in Barbados? 280,000 people? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Cayman is less than 100,000, I think. So for our artists to make it, we have this thing, and I felt it when I was in Community Jones, is that, we can be big here. We can be big here. People can know us here. But if you really want to feed your family on a consistent basis, 280,000 people can't do that.
Just to add to that, so The wonderful thing about what's happening with the disruption happening in the world is that we're moving from a unipolar to a multipolar world, which means that we have more marketplace to access.
Absolutely.
And we'll be pushed in that direction. On our continent, there's identity, there's language, and there's marketplaces we can trade with. So those are the things at a macro level we need to do in order for us to come eat here, you to come eat there, and for us to see how we grow our spaces together with not depending on the Western or the US. And yeah.
You know, Patrice, I deliberately wore this outfit today.
And you look great.
I deliberately wore this hat. And everybody come up to me, hey, what is that? I have been a professional now for about 30 plus years, Keith, working in different areas. No one in my entire life has asked me why you're wearing a tie. Nobody's ever walked up to me and said, Daniel, why you wearing that tie today? You understand? This is, I mean, you know, I want our creators, but more broadly, our people to appreciate that we as a region have access to the world. And specifically, like you just put it more eloquently than I ever could, Andrea, not just the Western world, but Africa, the fastest growing continent and economy in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel bad cutting you off, but I also want to get some of these questions. We have amazing questions. I'm so proud of all of you. So I'm going to just pick them randomly because they're all great, and whoever chimes in, it's fine, okay? So the first question, I'll go for an easier one because of time. Is it easier to pursue funding collectively or individually?
Individually.
Why?
I don't know.
Joara, I feel like you wanted to answer this.
I think it really depends on how the funding is written. Sometimes actually it's better to apply as a group. Sometimes you might have more success as an individual, but you might be able to get more as a group. So sometimes actually pooling your resources will give you a better chance of getting funding than every man for himself. But it really depends.
I was being naughty, sorry. We've just been talking to the collection societies in the Caribbean to group together to develop joint projects and programs. And one of the recommendations I had to them was a foundation that covers the region and building as a collective. And in our sector, quite often people compete, but there's a nexus between collaboration and co-opetition. And if you collaborate as institutions, those collectives can be very powerful.
Just to add to that as well, one of the big things that I noticed about the Caribbean when I left was the lack of collaboration that happened within the creative industries. Yeah. And I think this is a really good question to really highlight that, because if I am a fashion designer and I need to apply for a grant, why am I not applying for a grant alongside a print designer that's going to make all the prints? Why am I not applying for a grant alongside the producer that's going to be producing the shows? So I think we really have to start thinking collectively in order to get out of this sort of single-mindedness that sort of traps us in our own incompetencies, but leveraging the competencies of others.
Yeah.
Thank you. Competency, good segue into this question. Given the necessary focus on education and cultural integration, are there any movements to influence curriculums that highlight cultural practices as well as valued learning and not extracurriculars? So basically, they're basically saying, are you guys doing anything, whether from a structured program or a movement, or whether it's an after-school program? Joara, I know you've done things to integrate your knowledge and your experience into the education system, rather than just an after-school program where they're learning how to dance, etc. So knowledge on grant applications, knowledge on the business practice, how to pitch to brand partners, how to get sponsorships, things like that. Eliana, I know each of you have an answer. What is IDB doing to integrate?
Which one would that be?
The one at the front. At the top, right?
Top right.
Given the necessary focus on education, we just spoke about it, in cultural integration, what is the IDB doing? Whether it's a movement, a program, funding, yeah.
First of all, the IDB, this about the, applying individually for grants or collectively, we as the Inter-American Development Bank, we work with governments, right? And I know, Andrea, you you're not too much into the policy, but we work extensively on providing the policy framework and having countries with robust policies to support the creative ecosystem. So we don't have direct grants for individuals, but we do work with governments in providing programs, sometimes policy-based loans that support the creative ecosystem as all. So we do at the same time provide technical assistance in, for instance, helping countries like, for instance, Ecuador, that I've worked for almost a year and a half in developing their national policy for the creative and cultural industries that will in turn help all the creatives. Imagine that a country has no consideration whatsoever in policies or tax exemptions or benefits for the creatives. So the policy infrastructures are essential. And at the same time, we also give courses, documentations, publications, hands-on activities that you, as creators, if they are in the audience, can avail yourselves of to really see how you can take your entrepreneurship, your creativity to the next level. And there's a question right there that also, you know, it resonates with me all the time. And the question is, how can we ensure that all these great ideas mentioned here become a reality? And it's a very profound question to me, honestly. And I've been working in the creative and cultural industries for 15 years, and I always say, you know, maybe I'm dead and I'm out of the bank by the time that the creative economy becomes a formal sector of development. I may not see the benefits of the groundwork that I'm doing right now, but just for us, whoever made this question, just for us to be here, all of us talking about the importance of financing the creative and cultural industry, of saying, you know what, the creative economy is a sector as productive and as important as education or infrastructure. So remember, my client, or the one that I speak with, is our governments. So when we talk with governments and they say, okay, we want to build a road and we want to invest in health infrastructure, water sanitation, I can also say, and I give all the grant to say, you also have to invest in your creative assets. So going back to that question, maybe there's nothing tangible that we will come out now, but I promise you, as passionate I am with this topic, that it's building on conversation that will lead towards pushing the agenda for the creative economy.
We will actually have something tangible.
Okay.
So at the end of this, you will have the opportunity to provide your email, as well as some additional questions. I'm collating all of the questions and sending it to the panelists to provide answers and submitting it to Dr. Mariel. I'm gonna give you guys all a report so you can use it as reference, whether you're a creative or someone working creatives, and I hope that's also gonna be useful for you. But Andre, you have something to add?
Ilyana, I apologize, I'm slightly schizophrenic, so I'm actually a policy person. I've been a policy person for the last 30 years. I used to work in the cultural industries growth strategy for national government. I worked on a range of policy initiatives for the European Union. I've got a team of about 10 researchers, and we develop policy and paper positions. But that's not always where I choose to play. Where I've chosen to play in the last 5 years is practical projects and programs. So I've been part of lobbying for copyright legislation, IP legislation, broadcast legislation, local content. But on the other hand, the one question over there talks about education. In Norway, each and every school-going child has access to 2 professional concerts per year. That's not the case in South Africa. So what we try to do is where we do those concerts, they're structured in a way so that it talks about identity, it talks about indigenous instruments, it talks about an artist's career. So we try to develop the models of policy, of practice. And for me, the way the shift needs to happen is that policy shouldn't be there, practice shouldn't be there. In the middle, you have praxis, where these things come together and we learn, because the world is moving so fast. Like the one question over there focuses on combating the rise of AI. Sorry, dude, never gonna happen. It's going to happen. You need to engage with it. AI has got tools that could benefit you. It could benefit collection societies. It'll help you crunch data, it'll help you crunch information. So sorry, I'm a schizo.
No, I understood you. I didn't think you were saying you were anti-policy. You just didn't understand the traditional way that policy operates. I think you're more about policy innovation. Policy as a tool, yes, but what are some tangible things to bridge the gap between...
Policy needs to look at the real world. There was a major treaty, the Cultural Diversity Treaty, that was signed by a whole range of countries, but the implementation has been horrible. There are many countries that have cultural policies, but actual funding for culture is deplorable.
Patching holes as opposed to actually giving...
There are a range of institutions that are dysfunctional in many countries. So I think we need to lead the change through programs and projects that are effective.
Are ongoing to not just one-off, like you were talking about the festivals. Not that you're anti-festival either. You were saying that that same money or investment can be used for smaller, more frequent projects so that you can get more scale and you can reach more audiences, reach more people.
No, I am anti-festivals.
Okay.
That's for Marielle. Only joking.
Just on the education point, and I think the question was whether there's a movement on. Well, right now in Barbados, the Education Transformation Program has at its core the creative industries, building that in as to how we do schools going forward. So that's one thing that's happening here. Also, the Student Entrepreneurship Empowerment Program, Development Program, at the University of West Indies, CDB actually provides funding support, technical support to that program. So there are things happening, but I think we need to scale them. Yeah.
Do you want to add something?
I want to jump in on two questions. So how can creatives in the Caribbean combat the rise of AI? The only way you can combat it is to just actually learn it. Now, question on the bottom right, how would partnerships benefit creatives in securing sustainable financing? Example, biodiversity, conservation environments, do they value and benefit the multi-sectoral strengthening? I think as somebody that actually has developed my fashion practice within cultural programs, I think you have to find a value proposition that actually goes beyond just the creative engagement. I think I could have gone to fashion, I could have gone throughout the journey of fashion of just making pretty dresses that people like. But because I was in so many cultural programs, I managed to find a place within what it was that I was doing that not only benefits me, but can also benefit people around me. And I think when you actually have a value position within your practice that actually is doing something helpful, that's really when you start to see shifts in change in how you can secure funding by attaching yourselves with other initiatives that are happening around you.
Thank you. I have to wrap. I have to be this person. But what I'm going to do is give you homework. So all of the questions, I am going to collate them. I'm going to circulate them to the panelists, get the answers, submit them to Dr. Marielle Burrow, and we're going to issue a report to everyone that's here. So as we wrap today, I'm going to wrap properly, okay? Please complete this short survey. And I'm going to wrap now so we can do the same thing concurrently. It's just 4 questions. It's just where you're from, your email, and what you found valuable. Let's take a moment to connect the dots while they complete the survey. So what we've heard today from lived experience, from policy, from management, from practice, is that the future of Caribbean creativity depends on stronger systems, bolder collaboration, and real investment in our people, whether it's education et al. And I hope you're all leaving today not just informed, but also empowered to play a part in shaping the future. So yes, we couldn't come up with the ideas today, but the dialogue will be a catalyst for change. Whether you are a policy person and you're going to improve or revise policy, or you're going to start new policies, or you're creative and you're going to seek out IDB and CDB programs to learn how to apply for grants and apply for funding, or whether you're going to change your model so that instead of doing bigger events, you can scale down in smaller ones, and so the money can go further. Dialogue is important in creating and catalyzing change. And before we close, this survey is going to give you a chance to tell us what you found most valuable and where we can do better. And finally, a huge thank you to our incredible panelists. I would like you to give it up for Eliana Prada, Daniel Joara and Andre. Weren't they great? Thank you for your bold insights. And to you, audience, thank you for your patience, for being such an engaged part of the big conversation. The work ahead is about building systems that don't just sustain, but regenerative, and regenerating our creativity, keeping it strong, keeping it fair, long-lasting, equitable, and sustainable, but rooted in our communities for generations to come. Thank you so much to the National Cultural Foundation, CARIFESTA Secretariat, and Dr. Mariel for this amazing opportunity. Good evening.
After this, right? I'm a firm believer in reports, so Patrice stuck to script. And for all the creatives in the room,